instead there's like a split between the body, because the baby only is the body when the baby is born. There's a split between the body and the mind, and the mind starts to think frantically and eventually creates what Winnicott calls this false self. And the person is then caught in this chronic creating of a false self through thinking in order to not have to feel the sense, to ward off the threat of annihilation of the self. And I wanted to talk about this because I have a profound experience in myself struggling with the cancer, because when you have something like cancer, which is in the body and creates all kinds of aches and pains and things like that, there's a tremendous temptation to think that everything that's going on is about the cancer, and that it's all about the present moment. And I have this, the cancer is in this, I have a lesion in my spine, and for the last week or two, I've had this really intense pain in my back. And so there's a place in me that gets hysterical. I'm going to get paralyzed. I'm going to end up being paralyzed because of this lesion. If there's going to be neurological damage, I'm going to be paralyzed. When I start to work with the kids, the emotional life that's actually in the musculature of my body, what shows up is this baby who didn't get to go on being, who is absolutely in terror and paralysis. There's that paralyzed, terrified baby who's projecting the past paralysis onto the cancer and the future. I'm going to be paralyzed. But in fact, there is an emotional paralysis in the musculature of my body. And what happens in psychology and what happens in in working with material in the clinical setting or working with one's own material is there's this, always this, I guess it's a natural inclination in the psyche to project whatever's going on out. And to be able to work with the metaphor of it and find it, where is it in the past? Where is it in the original, where's the original trauma of this? What's the story that's trying to be told here? And I find that actually if I can relate to this in my, this terror baby who didn't get to go on being, I realize, I've never been relaxed. I don't know how to relax. I don't know how to let down. There's tremendous hypervigilance. And, oh, Roger.
It seems like a good description so far about what happens with your body.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I wonder if you could help us, Sandra, to talk a little bit more about the, maybe you could even start to critique the heteronormativity problem.
Okay. So, thank you. Where am I going? That's partly this, baby. Okay, so what happened? The mother, in this situation with primary maternal preoccupation, what Winnicott says is she needs to make active adaptation to the baby's needs. How does she do this? It arises out of her devotion, made possible by her narcissism, meaning, I think, healthy narcissism, her imagination, and her memories, which enable her to know by identification what the baby's needs are. So the mother is imagining, this is a definition of empathy, basically. How does the mother empathize with the baby? She uses her imagination, her memories, and that enables her to identify with the baby. Okay, now you have a heterosexual mother looking at her infant baby who's a lesbian. Okay. Her job is to imagine this baby and identify with this baby. And so what I'm theorizing here is that in her imagination and in her fantasy of this baby, as the baby girl, her fantasy is that this baby girl is going to grow up and be like her. She's going to grow up and have babies and carry on the line and have a family, and she's going to, it's not in her imagination about this baby that this baby is going to be a lesbian. And I just want to invite you all to think about this, just to sort of imagine. Like, okay, here's the mom with her baby daughter, and like all of a sudden the mom gets the message, this baby is going to be a lesbian. Okay, what? Is there a feeling that happens? Do you get some sense in you that like this mother then might have a shift inside of her in some way?
Like a disconnect?
A disconnect.
Yeah, like a separation or a...
Revulsion.
Why bother?
Huh?
Like I get like, you know, certainly not all moms, but they're like, oh my God, you send this message to me? This child isn't going to be like me? Why bother? Why am I going through all this? Why am I going to raise this baby? It's like this fallback, second place, and second place is like 3 miles back from where first place would be.
Yeah.
Sounds like anger.
Oh, anger, yeah. I mean, and an infant, and all that projection.
So that, yeah. I mean, you know, I have this visceral feeling like the mother's like, you know, this isn't what I had in mind.
I think a lesbian mother is more likely to project that onto the child than a straight woman, because a straight woman wouldn't be thinking necessarily those thoughts. So it would be a gay woman who would be projecting that and would be perhaps afraid of the whatever.
Well,
I also think of the empathy part as to how can you empathize with something that you don't understand. For example, a straight person may have a hard time empathizing with that part of their child. So you couldn't, it would be very, very difficult for a straight person to empathize with that aspect of their child if they don't know it themselves. But they wouldn't project it if they don't have it in them. That's what I think.
and this is it's a really good point, the difference between conscious and unconscious. So you're like a lesbian mom would consciously maybe be thinking, like, oh, maybe my daughter's a lesbian.
Absolutely.
But then I think it's really important to note that just because the mother isn't consciously thinking it, the heterosexual mother isn't consciously thinking, then we have to know that actually the unconscious projection of heterosexuality onto the baby has tremendous force. That's what I'm postulating here.
Particularly where our culture is where it is now, where we still have a culture that is so, you know, dominantly, like you started in the beginning, it's just assumed that the right way to be is heterosexual, and if you're not, then you've somehow deviated in some way, you fell off the track somehow.
Yeah.
Instead of assuming that some people are just that way and that's the normal way for them to be, and that not everybody is exactly the same. Because if we had a culture that was more like that, then a mom, it might go through a mom's mind or a parent's mind, and depending on where they were at in their own feeling about it, it might be more of a curiosity or an openness. It might not necessarily all be negative, but I think it reflects where we are as a culture.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think, you know, and I want to put this out, I don't think this is just damaging to lesbians. I think this is damaging to all children, really, because it's a form of, well, when I talk about projective identification, that would be my, kind of my
The
argument.
message is you can only be okay if you fit in this certain little box.
Yes, it's a form of narcissism, actually. That's a way to think about it. The projection that you're going to be heterosexual onto the child is the equivalent of a profound narcissistic injury. It's a form of narcissism. So it says you're going to be like me. And when it's unconscious, it has tremendous power, much more power than if it's conscious.
Sandra, can you explain projective identification?
Yeah. Could you say your name?
Lillian.
Lillian.
I wonder how much
You know, when a mother is parenting an infant, generally speaking, my experience, because I work a lot with parents and children, I mean, in the early first year or two, mothers don't think that much of who this child will be. When they're a little older, they do. But generally not in the first year life. But they may for a fleeting moment or two, so they will have an idea, gee, I hope when my son grows up he'll be, you know, then usually there's straight pictures. But the danger is for any parent who creates any boxes ahead of time, it's dangerous, whether it's a homosexual picture or I want my son to marry a wealthy woman is also a different picture. Any picture is difficult if the parent really holds to it. So in teaching parenting or good parenting, most of the time, most parents don't put too much. But I do think there's an implicit heterosexual picture that's in the context of that. But most parents don't have a full-blown picture of their infant, as they leave the first year of life.
Yeah.
They don't.
Okay, well, again, I think we're talking like conscious versus unconscious. I think those distinctions need to be made. And I think, and like the, so I think that's a really good point. Like people aren't necessarily thinking that specifically, but they have fantasies. This is Winnicott's point.
A little.
They are fantasizing. We are always fantasizing. I would want to kind of argue that's what we are as human beings. We're always telling stories. We're always fantasizing about what's going on, and so I think that's.
I just want to add that I think there's an inherent narcissism in any parenting. I think most parents who consciously choose to be parents, there's a certain amount of narcissism in it. There's a certain amount of self-fulfillment or their own reasons why they're doing it. So there's.
Well, again, I'm going to go to heteronormativity here and say, my child, my son, my daughter, it's like, wait a minute, we have not yet developed a way of parenting that is actually valid. We're not there evolutionarily yet. We have not developed evolutionarily enough to be able to actually regard the infant as a separate, subjective, existential being in his or her own right. And that's really the bottom line here, and that you're pointing out, and I think that's completely right on. And I think to surface this aspect of it, I just want to say is really important because it goes unnamed and unsaid so much. And I'm going to say a little more about, it's about your erotic life. Okay, so it's not just like, oh, I want you to grow up and be rich. It's like one's erotic life is at the core of one's being and the core of one's energetic system. And if that is banished from the beginning because it's not mirrored and it's not seen and it's not imagined and it's not talked about, and in fact it's treated as repulsive, that has profound psychological implications. And it's all unspoken. Not like, you'll be a lawyer, you'll be a doctor, and that's spoken and we can go back to it. But all of this happens at a nonverbal, and it has profound psychological implications for the capacity of a lesbian child to come into her body and to come into her own selfhood. So that's what I want to talk about a little bit more here, because I think we can't leave out the erotic piece. Yeah. So
I want to speak not as prompter, but just to contribute, which is, I think it's really important to articulate kind of the position that you're coming from, Sandra, is one of depth psychology, and is one where the unconscious is, the conscious self is the tip of the iceberg, and that the unconscious is vast and incredibly deep and incredibly influential. And I think it's just important to clarify that that's the position you're coming from. And even that some of this material in the first year of life may be happening almost at an archetypal level. That it may not even be biologically happening quite yet at the early